Preparing the message for today, I knew that we were going to be having a good number of young folks baptized in water. And I was so excited, and I'm still excited. I wanted the message to be something that would be beneficial to them and to each one of us. And I had one idea, and usually one idea at a time is all I can handle. But that one fell by the wayside, and God gave me another one. And I trust it to be a blessing to you today. And now this is not a trick question, okay? I want the right. How many of you are children? Where did the rest of you come from? I told you it wasn't a trick question, okay? I mean, we're hopefully you're a child. Even if you're 80 years old, you're a child of somebody. Okay, let me ask you one now. Now it gets a little bit more restrictive. How many of your parents? Okay. How many are grandparents? Now, grandparents is reward for not killing your kids while they were teenagers. Yeah. So, grandparents. How many great-grandparents do we got here? Good, man, look at that. Do we have any great-great-grandparents? Oh, yeah, we do. So we've got 5 generations represented here today. 5 generations. Man, that's kind of blows me away. And whether we want to or not, we get labeled. See, when I was in school, I happened to be in one of those classes where everybody was richer than I was and everybody smarter than I was. I was the poor kid. And they even put signs around the school, slow children for me. So we get those labels. And some labels can be offensive. And now, they even label the generations. I don't quite understand all this stuff because they label the generations, and that started out, you say, where did that come from? And the best that I could come up with, they said around 1900, a lady wrote a book called The Sun Also Rises, and she used the terminology, it's a lost generation. And so from that, they begin to call and decide that we're generations. You had the 1900s, you had the GI generation. Those are ones that, served in World War I and whatever. And then after that, they had the silent generation. Now, I can understand why they're silent. They still getting over World War I, trying to get ready for World War II, and having to go through the Depression. And so they're known as the silent generation. Of course, Tom Brokaw said this is the greatest generation. So we get these labels. Then, of course, we have the baby boomers and the busters and the 13s, which was Generation X. And then they have the millennials, which is Generation Y. And then the Generation Z, or they call it the new silent. Now, I want to tell you, after seeing some of these being interviewed on TV lately, they need to be silent. That has nothing to do with this generation over here, though, okay? Because you have to wonder, well, where did they come from? What turnip truck did they fall off of? But the reality is that we get these labels, and they're unique. Sometimes we don't like them. I remember growing up in a Pentecostal church. Some of us said we were holy rollers, or those runners in the aisle. Different ideas, different names. We get lumped and we get labeled. And as I said, I got labeled as being the poor kid. We have those labels, and sometimes we wonder, well, where did they come from? But in the middle of David's listing of his army in Chronicles, it gives us a verse that I want to just use as a springboard today. Just one verse. Right in the middle when they were naming people, in 1 Chronicles it says, the men of Issachar who understood the times and knew what Israel should do. This one family, the sons of Issachar, they understood the times. Now, wouldn't you like for somebody to come up to that standard today? I'd like to challenge you young folks to understand your times and to know what Israel needs to do. Now you say, well, we're not Israel. No, but let's just say we need someone to understand the time and know what America needs to do. Or to know what your family needs to do. Because we need that understanding. And it would be nice if someone had the discernment today that understood the times and knew what to do. And the reality is, I believe we do. I believe that regardless of the bad publicity and all of the things you read on the news and or hear in the news, that there's some folks today that is a generation that wants to change the world. And it's not all bad. There's some that wants to impact their generation for God. I believe these precious young people over here is a great example. And I believe some of you, yes, give them a hand. See, I believe that they are a generation that wants to raise up and be counted. One of the things about millennials, the reason they don't get along with some of us older ones, they always want to ask the question, why? Now, see, for those of you that might be in that range, see, we grew up when there's someone in authority that told you, you didn't ask why, you just did. Okay? My dad, you know, if he said jump, you ask him how high on the way up. You didn't dare ask my dad, well, why should I jump? Or how high should I jump? No, you just did. But now it's a different generation. They ask why, and we've determined, well, you know, that's wrong. That's not wrong to ask why. We might want to spend time trying to determine why. Why? See, it's okay to, I hear people say, well, you never question God. Why not? God doesn't tell us not to question him. But sometimes he has to do like my dad, just because. He said, you can't understand it right now. Now, I don't know about you, but I've had that answer from God before. God, why? He said, you couldn't understand it. So just because I said so, and later on, as that old song says, further along we'll understand it. Further along we'll understand it. But we need to see a generation that comes up. And I'd like to ask you to go to Psalm 24. And let's look at a couple of verses there. Psalm 24, begin reading at verse 1. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. For he founded it upon the seas and established it upon the waters. Who may ascend the hill of the Lord? Who may stand in his holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart, who does not lift up his soul to an idol or swear by what is false. He will receive blessing from the Lord and vindication from God his Savior. Such is the generation of those who seek him. Such is the generation of those who seek him, who seek your face, O God of Jacob. I believe that God is raising up a generation. And I know, yes, I read the Bible prophecy. I know there's going to be a great falling away. I know there's going to be rebellion. That's all part of it. But I also read where it says in the last days, he will pour out his spirit upon all flesh, and that they will do great things and great exploits for God. And that's the challenge that I give these precious young people today, that this is your generation, and he wants you to seek God, seek his face, and seek his guidance. And I know some of you say, well, wait a minute, where do we fit in? But the realization is each one of these generations need each other. Each one of us need each other. Psalm 78, notice what it says. Verse 1. O my people, hear my teaching. Listen to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things from old, what we have heard and known, what our fathers have told us. We will not hide them from their children. We will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his power and the wonders he has done. He decreed statutes for Jacob and established the law in Israel, which he commanded our forefathers to teach their children, so the next generation would know them, even the children yet to be born. That's the following generation, and they in turn would tell their children. See, there's 4 generations right there. Then they would put their trust in God and would not forget his deeds, but would keep his commandments. Generations. And sadly, there's another group in America. I wish it were not true. But one of the terms that's going around today is that we have a fatherless generation. And many of the problems we have in America is from lack of godly men's influence in people's lives. Those are situations, they're circumstances. And I know somebody said, well, Pastor, some of these things can't be helped. I understand that. But we need to realize that it does not have to be a blood family member to be a generation that can influence this generation. We can be the family of God to get together and support and encourage them. Turn with me to Jeremiah. Now, Jeremiah wrote in a very bad time in Israel. It's amazing how as we look through history, every generation seems like, well, you know, the good old days and then the evil days. We have the good days and the bads, and there's some people say, boy, back in my day, that's when there were good people. And then others say, well, man, in my day, it's worse than it's ever been. The reality is there have been pockets of evil and sinfulness ever since creation. And in Jeremiah's day, he was writing to a very, very situation and circumstance that was terrible. He had just told them you're going to be in bondage for 70 years. They'd be in bondage for 70 years. And notice what he says here in Jeremiah chapter 50. Begin reading at verse 4. In those days, at the time, declares the Lord, the people of Israel and the people of Judah together will go in tears to seek the Lord their God. He says they're going to be looking for God. He says Judah and Israel. That was the 2 divisions. They had divided the land. And they'll go seeking God with tears. They'll be sincere. And I really believe there's a sincerity among people today that are greatly looking for God, looking for direction, seeking God's help, just as they were in that day. And Jeremiah said they'll be crying and they will ask the way to Zion. Now, Zion, you say, well, what's Zion? Well, Zion's the city of God. And in Scripture, it's threefold. It's Jerusalem of the days of old. It'll be the new Jerusalem during the days of millennial reign. And then it'll be the heavenly Jerusalem throughout eternity. But I believe that there are people today that are looking for the way to Zion. They don't know it. Some of them are looking in a bottle. Some of them are looking in drugs. Some are looking in lives of promiscuity. They're looking for the way to Zion, but they don't know what they're looking for, and there's no road maps that they've been able to find. And they ask this question. They will ask the way to Zion and turn their faces toward it. They will come and bind themselves to the Lord in an everlasting covenant and will not be forgotten. Notice verse 6. My people have been lost sheep. Their shepherds have led them astray and caused them to roam on the mountains. I wish that I could stand here and tell you today that the church was totally innocent, that we had not misled people. I would love to be able to tell you that the church had never let people down, that pastors had never fallen, but that would be a lie. And we looked our face upon people, and we've been disappointed. And even the shepherds, you say, why would he say that? Because Jeremiah was one of a minority. See, there were plenty of preachers in his day. There were plenty of them that said, oh, everything's going to be fine, everything is good. And Jeremiah wept over it. And he said, this generation has been led astray. And we can blame the Democratic Party and we can blame the Republican Party. We can blame government and we can blame it all. But the church has to stand there and say we're partially guilty. The ministers have to say we're partially guilty. The people that sit in the pews have to say we're partially guilty. Because there were people looking for the way to Zion. And they didn't have somebody that they could follow. Parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, this generation is asking the way to Zion. And they need someone, not just to tell them, but somebody to follow. I am terrible with directions. I'm an old country boy, and maybe I live too far out in the country. I don't know, but I'm terrible with directions. Before the day of GPS, if I got lost, we would stop and ask directions, and I would ask my wife to go in and get directions. Now, it was not because I thought I needed, the break. I knew that they would tell me directions, and I'd come out, and I'd still have them wrong. Some of you have tried to put and follow directions of putting together a swing set. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Whatever way you do is wrong. And so I would stop and ask, and particularly, now I'm not from Alabama, I'm from Florida. Everybody thinks I'm from Alabama. But my parents were from Alabama, and my brother lives in Alabama. And if you go up to Alabama and ask directions, you're in for a treat. Well, you go down past the chicken pens. There's 948 chicken pens on that road. Then you go, now I was up there hunting, and they said, you go by the couch. I said, what? Oh, there's a couch out by the road. I said, well, how long has it been there? Said, well, 2 or 3 years, you go by the couch. And this is what I really like. Go by the 3 pine trees. Do you know how many pine trees there are in Alabama? And you ask them, well, what about the roads? What's the name of the road or the number? I don't know about that. It's just past the rail. It's just right beyond that mailbox. Terrible. And I'm still today, I am pleased whenever I get that blank look. Somebody say, hey, why don't you just follow me? I will take you there. Huh? Anybody know what I'm talking about? And I believe that's what this generation, they're looking for Zion, and they don't want somebody to try to tell them there, because there's a lot of curves in this road. There's a lot of things that look different from different people, and there are a lot of things at a different time of day look a different way. They don't need somebody to just say, well, that's the way you go. They want somebody to follow me. And that's what Paul said. He says, follow me as I follow Christ. This generation is looking for someone to lead them to Zion, David's city. Which way to Zion? Jesus' day in the book of Matthew. What did Jesus say his generation was like? You say, well, Jesus lived in the perfect generation. No. In the book of Matthew, chapter 11, verse 16, to what can I compare this generation? They're like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling out to others. We played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We sang a dirge, and you did not mourn. Now, what in the world was he talking about? What he was saying, he said, what do I compare this generation to? This generation is an unresponsive generation. And if I was going to give a name to our generation, I'd have to say we're kind of unresponsive. Why would he say that? Well, what does this mean? Well, now you play on your iPads and the iPhones and all these different games you got. But you know what the games were in Jesus' day? The children played weddings and funerals. If they played jacked up music, that meant they were having a wedding. They were carrying on. That was what they did. And if they played a dirge or a mournful thing, they were having a funeral. And they would have that music and nobody was dancing. Nobody was getting involved with it at all because they were a non-responsive generation. And I'll have to tell you, that has not totally passed away. We still have a not responsive people, even within the church, that God says we need somebody to lead that generation. Who's going to do it? Well, let somebody else do it. Bless God, I'm retired. I'd like for you to find the word retired in the Bible. Now, I'm not against retirement. One of these days I is. But the reality is, God needs you, every age, to lead and give direction to somebody that's looking for Zion. You say, well, I'm too old. Well, James Davis visited Sir Edmund Hillary shortly before he died. Edmund Hillary was the first person to climb Mount Everest. And he passed away shortly after this interview that James Davis had with him. And Edmund Hillary made a statement. He says, there is a season when time works against us. Have any of you noticed that? Huh? How many notices that the gravitational pull gets stronger the older you get? There's a season when time works against us. But then he says, and a season when time works for us. You say, well, that makes sense. But he went on to say this. The issue is we don't know which season we're in. Because, see, sometimes we think, well, I'm old. But you might be in the season and opportunity just like our sister was at the car dealership. They may be somebody looking to see how to get to Zion. And your experience, your hurts, your aches, that time may work for you. You can say, listen, I went through a divorce. My parents were alcoholics. I was raised in a certain way. See, because that's when time works for you, because you can have that experience. And the reality is we never know. Now, I've looked over this group pretty good. I'm not sure if I see a Billy Graham, but I don't know that I don't. Huh? I don't know that there's not another Billy Graham right there. Or, I mean, and it doesn't have to be ministers. I don't know that there's not another Ben Carson here. But see, these are needing someone to point them to Zion. Because I'm a firm believer, if we're in God's will, He has a plan for us. And that plan is better than any plan we can plan for ourselves. I didn't share this with the first service, but I want to go to Ephesians. I don't even think he has it on the screen. But Ephesians chapter 5, verse 8, where it says, for you were once darkness, but now you're light in the world. Live as children of the light. For the fruit of the light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth. And find out what pleases the Lord. Have nothing to do with fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. For it is shameful even to mention what the disobedient do in secret. But everything is exposed by the light becomes visible. For it is light that makes everything visible. This is why it is said, wake up, O sleeper. In other words, don't be that unresponsive. Rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Be careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Isn't that what's saying? Understanding your generation, understanding your time, understanding what God's will is, and that's your challenge, and that's your challenge to help lead them to find Zion, to lead them. I was totally blessed last Wednesday, or July 4th. Went down to Lake Wales to attend Garrett McKenzie's memorial service. And our former children's pastor was there, the wife, Murtis. And afterwards we were sitting, he said, do you remember when I came when Johnny and I came to your church, and I said, yeah, that was a long time ago. And I tried to figure it out. It's probably between 25 and 30 years ago. And she said, do you remember what you preached? I said, I don't remember what I preached Sunday. She said, well, I do. Said, you preached that we have to forgive others, we have to forgive God, and we have to forgive ourselves. Now, I'll still tell you, I still don't remember it. I remember them being there. But she says, whenever I got home, the next day doing my devotion, I said, I don't think there's anybody in the world that I have any animosity against. I've forgiven everybody. And I certainly don't have anything against God. I've complained some, but I certainly don't need to forgive God for anything. But when she got to forgiving herself, she realized, she said, Satan had been beating me up because I had thought that I failed as a mother. That I had failed. Even though I did the best I could, I failed. And I realized that I had to forgive myself. Now, the reason I share that's not to boast about my great preaching, is to boast about the fact that God has the ability to place someone in our paths that we never know had an impact on our lives. When I said that a while ago about the next Billy Graham, I have no idea. Should the Lord tarry, there may be a Billy Graham. There may be any great preacher that you wouldn't want to name, great teacher, a physician. There may be somebody over there that can discover the cure for cancer. But they need someone to show them the way. Well, I'm too old. Told about that. Lead us to Zion. See, I know that I told you I want to lead them. Well, I'll have to tell you, folks, if I was leading you literally, you'd have to walk slow. Now, I could stay up with them a few years ago, but now this is the way. If you want to wait on me, but if not, go 3 trees down and I'll catch you. Because you're going to have to go. And so I can't show the way as fast as I used to, but I can still do it. But see, we have an idea that we have to be fast. Look at Psalm 92. Psalm 92. Verse 12. The righteous will flourish like a palm tree. They will grow like a cedar of Lebanon, planted in the house of the Lord. They will flourish in the courts of our God. They will still bear fruit in old age. Now, if you can't relate to that, you will. If you live long enough, you'll be able to relate to that. They will bear fruit in their old age. They will grow they will stay fresh and green. Now that's a challenge. Proclaiming the Lord is upright. He is my rock. There is no wickedness in him. There is no wickedness in him. Paul said to the church, I've already mentioned it, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. But notice what he did later on in life in the book of Philemon. It's only one chapter long, just one verse. It says, yet I appeal to you on the basis of love. I then, as Paul, an old man, some translations say an aged man, but I, Paul, an old man, and now also a prisoner of Jesus Christ, I appeal to you. 5 generations of people here today. 5 generations that each one of us must be dependent upon one another. We're not isolated among ourselves. Our generations overlap. And I hope I outlive my generation and live into another generation. But the reality is, each one of us, we need each other. One of my favorite movies is White Christmas. I love White Christmas. I love that movie. Now, I have to admit that sometimes singing gets a little long. I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. Oh, Bing does a good job on that. But you know what I really love about it is not the song White Christmas. My favorite scene, I believe, in all movies is the closing scene of White Christmas. When they give a plea that all of the people that served under the general would show up and honor him. And those of you that know it, you could sing it with me. But you know it says, I'll follow the old man wherever he may go, as long as he may stay. Let me look. I had to look up the words. Let me get it again. We'll follow the old man wherever he wants to go, long as he wants to go, opposite to the foe. We'll stay with the old man wherever he wants to stay, long as he stays away from the battle fray. And then here's the good part. Because we love him. We love him. That's the reason we serve Christ, is we follow him because we love him. And the biggest problem with that song is that one phrase is wrong. Because see, that phrase says, as long as he stays away from the battle fray. Their idea was to get the general away, let him retire. But our general doesn't retire. Our general doesn't retire. When we first started putting together our safety team and security team, the head that's heading it up, he said, now our first objective is to keep you safe. I said, throw that out the window now. I said, that's not the first objective. Well, why not? I said, because I'm the shepherd. Have you ever tried to see that you protect the shepherd? You protect the sheep. This is the first responsibility, not me. Now, I did go on to tell him if somebody started shooting at me and they wanted to shoot back and protect me, that's okay. Okay? I don't want to play Superman, but that's not the idea. It's not to protect me. And you know what? If you read the rest of the chapter of Psalm 24 that we read earlier, look at what it says. We stopped at verse 6. Let's go to verse 7. Lift up your heads, O ye gates. Be lifted up, you ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. Lift up your head, O ye gates. Lift them up, you ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is the King of glory? The Lord Almighty. He is the King of glory. So when we sing that song, I'll follow the old man, we'll follow God because he's our leader and he goes before us and he'll fight our battles for us. But I believe that he's a challenge in each of us. And our generation, whichever generation you're in, to share the next generation, to show them the way to Zion. To show them the way to Zion. Amanda and Daniel is going to take the people that's going to be baptized back. And in just a moment, we're going to start our baptismal service. Look at these precious young people. Let's give them a hand. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. They're going to be following somebody. Now, hopefully, their main leader is God. I said, hopefully, the main leader is God. We do not follow man. But each one of us, going back to Jeremiah, he said they looking for the way to Zion. Looking for the way to Zion. So I close today asking you, are you willing to be a leader to Zion? I mean, everybody's wanting to be a leader if they can be number one, if they can be out in the spotlight. But according to Jesus, how many thinks he's a pretty good to model after? He says, if you want to be great, be a servant. Be a leader by serving and letting your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify the Father. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for your word. And God, I pray that this message and its sincerity will minister to every one of these precious young people. But not just the children, but the parents, the grandparents, the great-grandparents, the great-great-grandparents, the generations that they say, I want to show them. Not by telling them what to do, but by leading them the way to Zion, the way to eternity. And Father, if there's anyone here today that their destination is unclear, a lot of what we said today may not have made a lot of sense to them, but they know that they're dissatisfied with the direction they're headed, and your Holy Spirit is speaking to them, said, you need to change directions. You need to head to where I want to lead you and guide you. So, Father, minister to them even right now. Draw them to you right now. God, we ask you to minister